It's the Resistance broadcast. Welcome everybody to the show. Happy Monday. It is the week of Thanksgiving, and today we're going to give thanks for Star Wars. James, we got a pretty interesting topic. Hopefully it doesn't get too spicy. I don't know, but basically we're going to be talking about Luke Skywalker's story and how well overall it will age over time, specifically how it ended, I think. And I don't want to get into the what ifs or if they did this or if they do that. Just go based on what did happen and how well it might age over time, as opposed to if, say, Luke was the hero and everyone hugged at the end, But we'll get to that later. But that's going to be our main discussion. So gear up for that. But welcome to the show. John, James, Lacey is on hiatus. You probably heard last week. She gave birth to her first son, Archer Luke. And they are doing well. She's taking time away from her day job, pod, all that stuff. So we still obviously talk to her regularly. But for everyone out there, she is doing well. You can send her your well wishes, of course, through the pod, but also at Lacey Gilleran on social medias. Before we get into the first segment of the day, James, fell under the radar a bit, as it might, but someone who's made stuff of this high of legacy and quality, artist Roger Castell passed away at the age of 91, and he is known for making the poster for Jaws, the iconic shark rising up to eat the swimmer, and of course the hanging up on my wall right behind me right there, the poster for, move your finger, John, the other way, right there, The Empire Strikes Back. But obviously he will live on through that forever, and other very cool posters he's done for less notable movies. But yeah, Roger Castell passed away at 91. I had to bring that up because, I mean, my favorite movie poster of all time is Empire Strikes Back. And I'll be honest, I never knew who did it. And then as I found out of his passing, then I find out, oh, this is the guy who also did the Jaws poster? I didn't know that. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, pretty cool. So good for him. We can all only wish to have that type of legacy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it's one of those things where like you don't really think about something until it's too late. And then you're like, you go and look at the poster and, you take some time with it that you have seen it a million times otherwise. But now then you start to look at it and you're like, okay, well, what did this person do to like craft this? And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I never really noticed that detail. Or, oh, I never really thought about how what I've been looking at is a little bit different. Like, I actually don't know. There's no scene in the movie where Han Solo dips Leia like that, you know? Yeah. So it's like, it's just interesting because it's like it sets forth a precedent that technically isn't even in the movie, Yeah, I mean, it seems heavily inspired by the poster for like Gone with the Wind, and they wanted to put that classic, romance vibe into it. But when you compare these organically made pieces of art, posters, to what we get today, which is just like copy-paste heads into a mishmash in Disney's marketable blueprint, it's sad in a way, and a little bittersweet that it seems like it's a bit of a lost art. Now, I know there's other people out there who, like Paul Shipper, and people who really do great jobs making posters and stuff like that. But I feel like it's one of those, not to be punny about, but lost arts in a sense of that old school poster making. But RIP, but as long as my wall's up, it will forever be there. And I always love the Jaws poster too, so I think it's so amazing that he did both. But James, we have some Star Wars to talk about. So are you feeling it? You got your Visions t-shirt on. I got my Jacked Fish t-shirt on. You designed this. Does everybody know that? No. I don't know. No, I don't think so.
There he is. Jacked Fish. But let's get into our first segment of the day. Will of the Force, dude.
All right.
I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it.
Longtime listeners of this show know exactly what we're doing here. We'll with Will of the Force. But for anyone who is new joining the Resistance broadcast for the first time, this is where we pitch questions and guess whether something will or will not happen in Star Wars. In addition to the questions that we provide, we also take questions from TRB Patreon supporters who can also submit questions and make it onto the show like this person did. So we're going to kick it off right away with Commander Joey Sack. Joey sent us the question: will we ever find out what happened to Kelleran Beq after he saved Grogu from Order 66? I'm going to jump in first and I'm going to say, yes, we will. I feel like they've been slowly telling that story of like, oh, look, he's in this hallway. Like, oh, look, he was in this other hallway. Oh, there's a door opening, you know. Oh, it's Kelleran Beq, and he got to see him go away. Like, I don't think that's the end of the story. I also think that it was so well received the character that saved him because of the connection with the game show for kids. And I think it's cool that it was this person in the real life, situational thing, like, oh, he gets his redemption. I just feel like there's more to that story that they're going to tell probably in season 4 about what happened to that character and what happened to Grogu and how he went even out of Order 66 into the situation that he was in. It almost might even be something like a through line for the entire series of The Mandalorian, that by the end of The Mandalorian, we will see how he ended up in that, base or fort or whatever in season 1, episode 1. But what do you think about Kelleran Beq's return and more of this Order 66 scenario being seen in the show?
I don't know if we're gonna see what happened to Kelleran Beq. I don't know. I think it was to me it felt like this is a good moment for Ahmed, and it's a big moment for Grogu. So if we can give this to Ahmed for this character that he did, like you were saying, for the Jedi Challenges game show, let's bring him into the story. I think it's a really nice thing for them to do for him. But I don't know that means we're going to see more of him as that character or that we need to. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I think we know what he did to save Grogu, and we know where Grogu has gone since then and where he's going. And I think that's enough. I think Kelleran Beq as a character doesn't have to do anything else. And he will forever be known as the Jedi who saved Grogu. I think, sign me up.
I should have done a little bit of research because I thought about the question and I thought, oh, I know my answer to that. But now that we're kind of talking it through, he sent Grogu to that ship over there with his friends. He also boarded the ship at the end, right? They're on the same ship going away?
I don't recall, to be honest.
Okay, we're on the same page.
I believe it ends very open-ended as far as I remember. We're not sure where they go or what's going on.
I knew we weren't sure where they went, but I wasn't sure if I was trying to clarify, did he get him on the ship and send him away, which would be like, well, we don't need to see Kelleran Beq, we could continue with Grogu. Or is it they got on the ship together, and when we do continue with Grogu, he would obviously be part of it. I also thought too, like, it's kind of one of those things where like people like dying in movies, and if you could, Kelleran Beq would be like, yeah, man, kill my character off. I mean, when am I ever going to show up again in live action? It doesn't make any sense at all. So if I have this opportunity to my dying breath, defend Grogu and be the guy that says, get out of here, and I'll press the button that blows up the grenade or whatever and saves him. I mean, that's dumb, but you know what I mean? I think that there's an opportunity for him to say like, yeah, man, kill me. I want to like die in Star Wars. That would be, cool. Like it would be his own Order 66 moment. He got the good moment where he was able to kill all the clone troopers. But, it'd also be cool if he was one of the characters who was killed in Order 66.
Yeah, I just have this odd feel. I just feel like I'd be surprised if we see him again.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another one here. We're divided already. The base divided.
Mhm.
Where we stack up on the next one. Will you be shocked?
No. You mean divided.
Devised. Will you be shocked if C-3PO and R2-D2 are not in the upcoming Rey Skywalker movie? John, do you think there's any chance that these characters are going to show up, or are you going to be shocked when they don't?
I will be shocked if these characters don't show up. Completely, unequivocally shocked that if they don't show up in this movie. That's my answer.
That's your answer.
Yeah.
So mine's a little more complicated than that. I think at the end of the day, yeah, I would be shocked if they weren't there. But I don't think it would like blow my mind, because I think we're in this weird state where like we're not really sure what's going on with Oscar Isaac and Poe Dameron. And the last movie that was out with Rey, when that movie ended, she was with BB-8.
Mm-hmm.
And
I feel like people get hung up on that, though.
I know, but C-3PO and R2-D2 both already got a small shaft on the last 3 movies where we were like, we're surprised they're not in these more. C-3PO a little bit more so in the last one.
C-3PO was awesome in 9.
Right, yeah. But again, like R2-D2 not in it a lot, and you know, R2-D2 had a great moment in 8 too, but again, not much in Force Awakens. I don't know. It just seemed like you would think that they would have been very present because they're easy for the same reasons you're saying you'd be shocked they're not in the movies from now on. It made all the sense for them to be in 7, 8, and 9, and they kind of weren't. So if they did want to move forward with let's do new toys and new, you know, we'll have BB-8 there and that'll be reminiscent, but it wouldn't blow my mind, but I still think they're going to be there. And I'm like, why not? Like, it shocks me, not that they did it, but because they're not doing it, you know, just like you could just so easily do it. Why not do it? I think that's more what would shock me.
I think actually, to contrast your point about the sequel trilogy, you know, for these next movies, we don't have the 3 bigger pieces of Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher involved, as far as we know. I mean, maybe there's another cameo or something. I doubt it very much. I think they're done. But
I don't even know which one, how you could bring it back. That's wild.
Well, yeah, and now you can bring everyone back, but flashbacks, you know, there's all de-aging, Force ghosts, dreams, visions. But my point is, you can get away with, let's try to get a new droid to be as maybe for the new generation as popular as R2-D2. We got BB-8 in there, you know, a little lesser for like Dio or whatever. I was gonna say Dio, because we got Chewie, we got the Falcon, we got Han, Luke, Leia still, so we're good. With those removed, Han, Luke, and Leia, I think it's even more important, especially if this is going to be the thing connected to the legacy mainline for the general fan base that knows that this is Star Wars, these characters and stuff. I think it's even more important for these characters to be in it now that you don't have Mark, Harrison, and Carrie. So I actually think they will be in it and probably have bigger roles than they did overall in the sequel trilogy, and that includes Chewie and the Falcon. So I think that's where they're going to go with this. I think it's important for this movie to be successful, and without having the legacy actors here to do it, you got to rely on these other more evergreen characters. So I really would be shocked, and I do frankly think they're going to get a bit of a boost when they come back. Yeah,
that's a good point. Definitely a good point. We're going to do another one from another one of our patrons. This one is from Major John Braco. Is that how you say it?
John Braco, I think, right?
Braco?
Yeah.
I was kind of debating that in my mind. I thought Braco sounded a little more last namey, but Bracco, either one.
Let us know, John.
Let us know. Absolutely. Clarify for us. John's question was, will Mark Hamill ever write or direct a live action series or a future movie? Interesting. Has he ever been asked or been interested in the past? Now, I can't say that he has or has not ever been asked in the past. I looked up what he's done as a writer, director, and producer. And the only thing I saw that was really, even close to this was he was partially kind of associated directing a little bit of a Lego short film.
Yeah.
I mean, literally like almost nothing in comparison. So the question is a little surprising to me, John, where you're coming from on this. What makes you think Mark Hamill would write or direct a live action series or future movie? Because my answer is going to be no. I don't think so. I don't think he would have any association or would. Maybe if he had interest, but he doesn't have. I don't want to say he doesn't have the chops, but he's not done that. That's not his forte. That's not what he does. So if he wanted to, he would really have to like get in and start learning. Look how long it's taken Dave to even get to the opportunity. Dave Filoni, I mean, to get to that spot where he could write a or work on a movie. So
yeah,
I don't know. What do you think, John?
I'm sort of in line with what you're saying. Like, he's in his 70s now. He hasn't really done it. I'd be surprised to see him start into that venture now. Everything you hear about Mark Hamill is he seems, and granted, he does it in a self-deprecating way that I don't know that he necessarily believes, but he likes being liked, it seems. But I don't think he has the ego or it doesn't seem like he has the drive to do this sort of thing when he talks about directors, even when he was talking about Rian Johnson, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He was saying like, well, what do I know? I'm here to be the vessel for the character. You're the storyteller. I'm doing what I'm realizing your vision and bringing that to life. It seems like I'm sure there were opportunities, It seems like it wasn't the path he wanted to take. So my answer is no. I don't think Mark Hamill will write or direct live action. And I would even go further to say I don't know him and I don't want to speak for him, but I don't think Mark Hamill would want anything to do with writing or directing Star Wars. I think he sees that as, that was George's thing. I was his actor. Same thing with J.J. Ryan, whatever. I would be very surprised if someone asked, would you ever, if you can go back and would you ever want to write or direct Star Wars? I would think he would make a self-deprecating jab at himself that people wouldn't want him anywhere near doing that. So that would be my guess is what he would say.
Maybe, who would want that?
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that'd be funny if someone could ask him so we could see if that what his answer would be. But I do not think we will see Mark Hamill write or direct in that regard.
What's funny is when John comes back at us and clarifies his last name, he'll also put in, you guys didn't see? Like, you didn't see this interview where he was like, I wish, that would be interesting. I'd love to do it, which is why he wrote the question in, that would be interesting. Like I said, to my knowledge, I don't think he's ever been asked or had any interest in the past. So I would say no. So hopefully that answers the question, John. Let us know what you guys think too. People who are watching the show on YouTube, or if you want to jump in on social media, let us know your answers to any of these questions. Kelleran Beq, Grogu, C-3PO and R2-D2 showing up in the Rey Skywalker movies, this situation with Mark Hamill possibly directing live action, all that. Let us know in the comments or send it to us on social media. What are your thoughts? We have one more question, which is, as John loves to do, leads us right heavily into the discussion. The last question for Will of the Force is, will Luke Skywalker's story age well over time? You want to go first? What do you think?
I think it will. I do. I don't know that I necessarily love how things ended for Luke, but I've always had this thought of if they just went and did the whole like Luke's the hero thing. I feel like in the moment people would have been very excited about it, but that it would have received a lot of criticism thereafter for not being risky enough, for not letting another generation take the baton, all that stuff. And like, well, Luke saved the galaxy once before. Oh, now we got to see him do it again. I think it would have been really big and fun in the moment. People would have loved Rian Johnson in that moment, whatever. But I think as time goes on and we are further and further removed from the drama of, what Luke should have done or shouldn't have done, I do think this is a powerful ending to his story, which is where I'm going to focus my energy in this discussion, is because I think that's the thing people are probably thinking about the most, is the third act of Luke's story, so to speak. I really do think time will be good to it. I even think time might even be good to The Last Jedi overall, but I'm not positive on that. I know people are still very split on it. But I just do. That's just what I think. What do you think? And we'll get into it in the discussion. But
yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to give away too much of what I can give my answer, but my initial thought on this was it won't age well for reasons. And then as I thought about those reasons more intently, I was like, well, I'm sort of disproving myself. So I guess I got to land on it will. And as we get into discussion, if you want to know more about that, we can. But I think at the end of the day, I agree with you that time sort of heals all wounds and is more, if everybody accepts it for what it is, it's more likely that people will come around and be like, it is what it is. And, I don't love it, but maybe it would be beneficial to understand it. There will be more people of those than there will the people that are like, I really liked this for years. And the more I think about it, the more I hate it, and it makes me angry and I get upset. But that's like over a decade. That sort of happened like right out of the theater. Mm-hmm. Give people like a month or 2 or 3 or whatever. People maybe did like it, but the more they discussed it with their friends, they saw the flaws and they learned to dislike it. But that's not something that happens over like decades. You know what I mean? Like it gets more and more and more pointed out to them, all these things where they're like, man, I really used to like this for like the first 10 years, but now I hate it. I don't know. I just don't see that. I feel like it is more likely to lean positive.
Yeah.
But
all right.
Let's get into it, right?
Let's fire up the discussion.
Boom.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right, let's do it. Will Luke Skywalker's story age well over time? So, many fans, including even Mark Hamill himself, didn't like the direction his beloved character, our hero, Luke Skywalker, was taken in The Last Jedi. Would the alternative of Luke showing up to save the day and live happily ever after sat better with fans in 2017? Perhaps. But what about long term? Will the freshness of what Rian Johnson did serve the character best for future generations? Will Luke Skywalker's story age well over time? Let's talk about it. So, I think I want to start, obviously, addressing elephant in the room. Mark Hamill doesn't like what they did with his character. I think he's been pretty candid about that. He zipped his lip and played ball to serve, George's legacy and all that. But everything I've heard from people who have interviewed him off the record, and also his own comments, he just didn't like how they handled Luke. He never saw Luke in a way that would be giving up or wanting to die or abandoning the Jedi or thinking the Jedi should end. So we need to establish that part of it. Now, with that said, of course, I completely respect and value Mark Hamill's opinion on the character, and he's right to feel that way because it's his opinion. I'm just thinking in terms of how the story is told, and decades from now, if people watch this story, will they get more out of it with the way it did end for Luke, as opposed to this sort of, I don't want to say fan service, I don't want to say nostalgia, but sort of a re-return to the glory and the reminder of, what Luke was in Return of the Jedi or what have you. Like, would he show up in his fully black tunic and outfit and with the green lightsaber and the glove and just be a little bit older and say like, I got it from here, folks, But when I think about his story in the sequel trilogy, and I think about all three characters in the sequel trilogy, Han, Luke, and Leia, I understand people's problems with it. But to keep it focused on this topic at hand, on whether Luke's story will age well, I think it will, because Luke had a genuinely different and fresh and new arc in this trilogy that I don't know if you would be able to call it that if he just rolled up, fully realized, still the guy, sort of like in The Mandalorian, wrecked house and everyone cheered and Luke's our hero again. I don't know. That's my starting point. And when I think about this, I keep thinking about the end of The Last Jedi when, we realize he's on the rock, he's meditating, he's giving everything he can to do something with the Force we've never seen anyone do before. I think that's powerful stuff. And the fact that it was new and fresh and it was still Luke Skywalker, I think is really cool. And I know people have problems with a lot of that story, but I think by the end, when Luke realizes he was wrong, and even in episode 9, he admits I was wrong to think the way I thought. As Mark Hamill said, like, what is more inspirational or helpful to kids watching these stories than to know that Luke Skywalker can also make mistakes and learn from them? So that's my starting point. You seem to have been jockeying in your own head about where you are with it. But what do you think? Do you think what we, especially thinking of how his story ended, so to speak, do you think based on how we see it now and how it's probably still pretty divided, do you think that will lean one way or the other over time? Especially if, as new people encounter Star Wars and experience the story in one, like, moment, so to speak.
Yeah, so that was sort of the direction that I was coming from, is I thought, well, let's take a look back at the prequels. There was like, they came out, the immediate backlash to them was that people didn't like them, right? They were bad. And now today, there's a new resurgence of likeness for them. People like it a little bit more. But I have also found that the people that don't like the prequels are still out there. They're still out there, and they still say, man, Star Wars was great. And then they released the prequels and they were awful. But they're not as loud as they once were. But also I feel like that number has dwindled because of two reasons. One, because younger kids who watched the movies and didn't have any preconceived notions got older.
Yep.
And the second part of that is that over time, people saw subsequent material, or they just kind of faded and they're like, man, why am I so angry at this thing? Like, why don't I just like it, or learn to like it? And people just kind of changed their opinion on it. Like I said, they watched the Clone Wars, and then all of a sudden they're like, maybe it's not as bad as I kind of was so angry about 20 years ago. And then I tried to compare that to the prequels or the sequels. And I'm like, well, one thing is I know for sure that, like, maybe people don't like Rey, but kids like Rey, and they'll grow up to like Rey because that was their Star Wars. But I was like, but this is interesting. Where does Luke Skywalker fit into that? Because Luke Skywalker to them is a new character. And I was like, all the people who don't like The Last Jedi now are going to stay with that. And all these new people, and then that was where it changed for me as I go, well, all the new people don't have an association with Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker to them is a person who was broken at first and then came back to do the thing that in their eyes, that's the way they see it.
Wait, how though? Are you suggesting they're not going to watch the original trilogy before watching the sequel trilogy? You know what I'm saying? Like, people aren't going to start with 7, 8, 9.
I think I don't know.
I would be surprised. So? I mean, if I think about, like, oh, how are you going to introduce your kids to Star Wars? I think people are either starting with Phantom Menace or they're starting with A New Hope.
Right, but I so part of this is like when I see kids dressed up as like Rey or Poe or Finn or something like that, or BB-8, you know, I'm assuming not so much that they've watched all the movies and that's their favorite character. I'm assuming they just that's Star Wars to them. Those are the characters. Those are the main characters.
So you're particularly talking about little kids when the sequels came out. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. And then they grow older and they're like, man, I've always loved the sequel. You know what I mean? Like when the kids who were watching it, they loved little Anakin. They're like, oh, I love Anakin. They don't know anything about Darth Vader and stuff. They just like Anakin,
the sequels are going to age really well when I've said this a lot, like when the kids who were 5 when TFA came out, who are now 13, right, in 10 years when they're podcasting or whatever the new version of podcasting is called, and talking about how amazing these movies are, because dude, you're right, the prequels have had this renaissance, but it's that crowd that's doing it, because they're now in their mid-20s. They're louder voices than people who were in their 50s who grew up with the original trilogy and maybe are a little cranky when the prequels came out. Those people still hate the prequels. That's the dislike for the prequels is still there. Some it's still there.
Like, I don't think very many people liked the prequels. This goes back to my Will of the Force thing. I don't think very many people liked the prequels, and now 20 years later they're like, what was I thinking? They're so bad, you know? Like,
correct. Right.
I think what happens is sort of the opposite of like, you really didn't like them at one time, and now 20 years later, you're kind of like, I'm okay with it. So I feel like that has sort of happened, and that will also happen with the sequels. But getting back to Luke, I think that the kids who were like, they just see Luke Skywalker as this like secondary character, like an Obi-Wan or something. And they're like, what's the story with that character? Oh, he was like broken. He didn't really trust the Jedi's ways anymore. He didn't really want to do it. And he was old. And then what ended up happening to that character? Well, he realized he was wrong. And he actually did something really cool. And they won't know this. They won't put this together. But he did something that was very Luke Skywalker. He did come back. He did save the day. He did save the Resistance. He did save the galaxy. And they can put that together, I think, better than people who were expecting him to do that in the first place. And then when they're introduced to him in the sequels, they go, that's not Luke. And they immediately shut it down. And it's like, I think a lot of people that say, that's not Luke Skywalker that I remember. Luke Skywalker would have came in and saved the galaxy. And I'm like, he did save the galaxy. Did we watch the same movie? You know?
Yeah.
And it's like they miss, I feel like a lot of people that argue that point, or at least people that I've had discussions with who often argue that point. Not everybody, but it seems to me like they sort of miss that angle of like, well, I mean, yeah, whatever at the end. Okay. But he was really miserable the whole time or whatever. And I'm like, but that's the point, is that, you know, he was miserable for this period of time and he comes back, he does that. So I think the people that don't have the baggage are going to be able to see that a little bit easier. And when they get older and they get those voices, they'll be able to convince more, they'll have better rhetoric against their parents. Like they're like, Dad, don't you see Luke Skywalker did this? And they can explain it to him. And they'll be like, that's how I've always seen it. And then the dads or the moms will listen to their kids and be like, you know, I never really considered that. I've seen that happen so much with the prequels. Right. I hated the prequels. Then my kids loved it. And I saw it through their eyes.
Yeah. And I think, because I'm thinking about the quotes and those sorts of things, and like Mark Hamill, when they were doing the first script reading with the cast on that famous photo of some of them on the couches in that sort of room in a square, and Mark Hamill was the one tasked with doing the narrating and reading the, you know, all that part. And he's like, oh, here I come, I'm coming up, I'm going to catch the lightsaber. And then it went to Rey, and he jokes. And but if that happened, and then all of a sudden Luke Skywalker starts fighting his nephew and stuff, like, it would have been insane, and we all would have went nuts in the movie theater. But I wonder if that would have gotten stale in retrospect to be like, really? Like, you just got the older guy and he came back and he did it. It's like, okay, I guess okay. But then when I think about Rey referring to Luke Skywalker as a myth in TFA, and then he literally becomes one in The Last Jedi, because at the end of that, we see the kids on Canto Bight playing with these, like, they made their own action figures, and they're telling stories of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one of the cooler scenes that I think people forget about, is this, like, these little kids and Broom Kid, who ends up, we see he can use the Force, telling these stories about Luke Skywalker. So Luke Skywalker is immortal now. He is more important in terms of what he means, as opposed to the guy who helped turn his father back to the light side and leading to killing the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. So he could have come back. He could have saved the day, and that would have been like, okay, these people know that you're the hero, Luke. But what Luke does in The Last Jedi, clearly, based on what they showed us, resonated throughout the galaxy. He didn't save the galaxy in The Last Jedi. He saved the Resistance, the last blinking pulse that they had. He saved his sister. People cared about him. Saved the Resistance. They went on to be able to continue this fight against the First Order. But also what it did was make Luke Skywalker this legend. He became a legend. And the proof was in the pudding, seeing those kids playing with their little action figures that Luke Skywalker came in and he did this. And it inspires this whole next generation of maybe Force users or Jedi. And maybe they'll hone in on that with the future Rey movie or something. So the more I think about that and what he did and how he died doing it, and the fact that it just became this legacy thing, I kind of wish now Episode 9 had more of this reference to Luke, because we see people across the other side of the galaxy on Canto Bight, these little kids doing this stuff. So that means it had to have reached
people showing up at Exegol being like, for Luke,
or showing up at Exegol, or there's a statue for Luke Skywalker, or the Resistance, refers to him, and you see
a banner somewhere.
Yeah, what would Luke Skywalker have done in this situation? Something like that.
And it's young Mark Hamill, the way we, what I mean? Even though he did the thing when he was older or whatever, like, people still will show pictures of them when they were in their prime. He was already propaganda, we know, for the war early on. So
and then you take, the name, the Rise of Skywalker, then has, multiple meanings, because then, Skywalker becomes a legend, this whole thing. And he doesn't have to be this materialized, real tangible human being anymore. He doesn't even have to be one with the Force or a Force ghost anymore. He is a symbol. It's sort of like Batman in that way, where Batman doesn't necessarily need to be there, but if you know that exists and that happened, it carries weight forever. And I think that will age very well, as opposed to if it was just Luke showed up, he kills Snoke or beats Kylo Ren or whatever. I really do think it does, because it also, The Last Jedi does this weird thing where it humanized Luke Skywalker so much that it made him feel even more real to me. And I don't know how else to put that, but I think that also lends to the layers of the character, which I think naturally ages better.
Sometimes I think, we get these stories from, say, Marvel or these other offshoots of comics and other things that are like what ifs, right? And sometimes I think of Star Wars is like the story that was actually told as the mainline story. Why don't we just think of it as like a what if, and it's like Snoke could have been the big bad guy, but what if there was this story, this other way that could have happened, where Kylo Ren cuts Snoke in half, he tricks him, despite how powerful Snoke is. He tricks him and he cuts him in half, and he becomes the supreme leader. It's like this sort of like, I compare that to like, what if Darth Vader would have killed the Emperor and then Darth Vader offered his hand to Luke, and Luke was like, no, I'm not taking it. You know, it's like that scenario. What if that happened in this one? Well, now you get to see it. Now you get to see that play out. In this case, yeah, you could say what would have happened if Luke did this, but what's sort of interesting is we got the what if story, which is equally good, but it might not be as what people wanted to see necessarily, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there's, I don't know, man. It's tough because I do want to go down that route of like what they could have done with Luke. I know everybody's talked about it endlessly, but to your point, one of the things here is like, do we think that if they would have done one of those stories, how would it have played out? And do we think it would have had a stronger lasting legacy than the story that we actually got? And I don't know. It's tough, man, because
dude, the ending of the
like
Last
the same
Jedi
thing happens to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we don't make this connection. If we would have gotten the prequels first and then got the original trilogy, you know, it's weird to say it like that, but then people would have been like, I can't believe they made Obi-Wan so stupid. Like he goes to fight Darth Vader and he has this opportunity to end the story of, you know, like how long it's been going on. It's been going on for years and the relationship and everything. And he just stands there and dies.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like this thing, but we don't, for some reason, we don't do that with Obi-Wan. We see it so clearly that it was doing something bigger because that move ultimately did something even greater, you know?
Yeah.
And I know Luke wasn't ever really planning a lot of the stuff that he was going through, but his intent was to save the galaxy by getting rid of this thing that's only ever caused problems.
Yeah. No.
And
yeah.
so then when he sees it a little bit differently, he goes, maybe that's not the best route. Okay, I'll save the galaxy a different way. I'll save the galaxy by saving the Resistance.
The only thing I think is hurtful here is I wonder if, like, could Ryan have told the story where everything happens except that whole, like, did it need to be Luke sensing something and having the moment of weakness to turn Ben?
Oh, right. Like, you take that one section out of the story.
Just take that out. Take that little part out, and I think people digest it a lot better. Because I think what people have the hardest time with is Luke igniting a lightsaber, standing over that kid, and thinking for a moment about killing him. I think that's tough for a lot of people to swallow that still to this day. It doesn't matter what you compare it to. You know, Luke's thoughts in the past about, you know, how he almost did it to his father. I get that. But he stopped himself in both instances. But There's something different about you are fighting this guy who your master told you will become a Jedi once you face this person. You know it's your father, but you also know he's evil, and you're in this battle with him, and you're in the heat of the moment. That's different than walking up to your sleeping nephew and having a thought and being like, I feel like this kid has bad coming, so let me kill him. That's the part I still have a hard time with. And I don't want to do the what if either, but I'm saying that part might not age well.
I want to do a different what if one day. Not like it's a full discussion, but seriously.
Well, let's not go down that tangent now, but
I'll say it. I'll say it out loud and I'll probably get a bunch of grief for it. But like, what happens if Luke does clearly see the vision of Kylo Ren and everything that happens, and he kills him? Oof. And he goes, and it's just like, it's my burden to bear. I go into hiding. It had to happen. I did what had to happen.
That'd be bad.
I know for like the movies, but I'm trying to say, like, let's pretend we're gods and we're watching this scenario happen out at like what trajectory does the galaxy have? Because this is okay. Here's a different scenario. This is like, would you go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby? It's like, it's that sort of that discussion of like, what if somebody goes back and stands over their nephew, a young Palpatine, you know, and it's like at this point he gets this clear vision that if I kill my nephew, who's going to end up causing the entire galaxy to fall apart because he starts an empire and all this other stuff, you know, at what point would somebody be like, okay, that sucks, you shouldn't kill a person because it's a baby?
Well,
but
yeah.
Also,
with Star Wars, none of that's definitive because the future's always in motion and, you know, all that. But
that's the good point. Yeah.
But back to it, that
I know
that's the only moment for me that I think won't age very well. Even for people, I mean, there are people who just love The Last Jedi and it can do no wrong. And I think that's kind of crazy because even my favorite Star Wars movie, The Empire Strikes Back, there's some things I'm like, I wish, you know, maybe that, I didn't love that.
And
as
I
much.
think there's a middle ground too. There's like that scene for me, for instance, is like, okay, I wasn't in the movie like cheering like, yes, this is exactly what I want out of Star Wars. But at the same time, it is what Star Wars is. So I've sort of come around to be like, okay, well, how can I rework that in my head? How can I rewire it? How can I understand it? How can I listen to what Ryan is telling me was the point of that scene? And then be like, okay, it is pretty realistic, like that some person could be in this scenario, you know, but
you know what?
But I don't disagree with you that like that's a tough scene. And look at what he's done for Ben, because it doesn't matter how bad that guy is. Poor Ben.
Yeah.
Even his family members were trying to kill him.
Right.
You know, and it's like
I love The Rise of Skywalker. As we're talking about this now, a part of me really wishes that I'm cool with him appearing at the very end to Rey with Leia. Luke. Sort of like the, you know, nod of approval.
And
like,
Leia.
Yeah, you are a Skywalker, whatever. But a part of me kind of wishes that his last scene was his death in The Last Jedi, and he didn't have that moment as a Force ghost with Rey. I think it might have been better if, you know, get the lightsaber a different way or whatever. Have Leia, you know, I'm sure she's still powerfully connected to Luke. Like, let Rey know what Luke thought or what he's thinking and that, you know, all that stuff. I feel like that scene, I get why they brought him in there and they did the thing with the X-Wing and all that. It was fine. It was cool. I liked it.
You probably couldn't have done the Carrie thing you were just describing. They might not have had the assets to pull that off.
Or there could have been a letter. It could have been...
Like, it would have been a better story. They could have
done a lot of... They probably could have done something else. I just don't know if I love that scene when I think about... Because Luke's death in The Last Jedi is beautiful. I think it's awesome. I think it really, truly is for Luke a bookended thing, because looking at the twin sunset in A New Hope and then seeing it, and then the second son arrives as he passes away into the Force is a perfect ending for him, which makes me not love that he had dialogue and a full scene or whatever in Rise of Skywalker. I get why they did it. Still love the movie. Nuance is a thing. But that ending, man, his ending in The Last Jedi is so good. It really is so good. How he just has nothing left. He crawls up the rock and he poises himself and he stares out to the sun and the second one arrives. It's just like such a beautiful ending, and the Force theme hits, all that. I think that alone is going to age really, really well. I do. I think that's going to end age very well for a lot of fans, including myself. I still really enjoy that scene a lot. So I'm not sitting here saying every aspect of Luke's story, especially this third act, is going to age particularly well. But I think overall, because they took chances and they gave him a new arc and they gave him something fresh to do as opposed to some sort of reset, I just think that inherently it will always age better. Like, Luke was relevant. Luke was relevant in the sequel trilogy, whereas sometimes when they do these soft reboots and bring back the old characters, it's like a wink to the audience. And it's like, oh, remember this, remember that. Which is how Harrison Ford felt a little bit about Han Solo in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
But then they bring him in Force Awakens, and he's got this big arc, Han Solo, and then Luke has this monster one in Last Jedi. Say what you want about the characters dying,
right,
or their fates or whatever. All three characters and actors had major significant impacts and new fresh arcs in the sequel trilogy.
I mean, I think that because, unfortunately, man, I really wish there was a way to see Rise of Skywalker with Carrie full on.
Agreed. Of course. Yeah.
But because of that, it's she doesn't compare to the question I'm about to ask of, in your opinion, who do you think did a better job, like, or not better job, but like, do you think Han Solo gives more to The Force Awakens, like as like a main character story, that's the purpose, or do you think Luke gives more in The Last Jedi? And it's tough because one is like all about his relationship with the bad guy, and the other one's all about the relationship with the good guy. And it's like, and you know what's funny about that? I've never really put that together, but Carrie's movie would have been the relationship between both of them.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'll say this.
It still is, but
I think, and this, I don't know how people feel about this, but I actually think Rise of Skywalker was Leia's best movie. I think her arc was like, I feel like in TFA, it was almost that what I was saying. It was sort of like cameos. Oh, there's Leia.
Right.
And go save our son. I'll be at the base. She didn't really do a lot. And then Last Jedi, she gets blown up. She's in a coma for half the movie.
Oh, come on. She did more than that, though. Like teaching Poe all that stuff about what it takes to stand up, to be the resistance, and light the fire and stuff.
Fine. But then Rise of Skywalker, she connects with Ben, stops him from killing Rey, gives her life force to save her son. There was a lot more weight in Rise of Skywalker. That was Leia's movie. It was supposed to be, and they did their best.
Because we saw her differently. We saw her as a Jedi.
And a mother.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You
didn't really get that in Last Jedi
surrogate mother, in a sense, to Rey. You know, whatever you want to call that. But the adoptive mother. But I still think Hamill's performance, we didn't really talk about too much, was great.
Pause just for a second. I want to go back to that. I don't think I've ever really put that together. Every time Rey says her last name is Skywalker, I feel like she's adapting that name because of her relationship with Luke and how she now is carrying on the name of the two of them. But I never thought of it as like she found family in Carrie, Leia being her master, but also her mother.
Well, yeah, that's how I see it, for sure. Yeah.
So she takes the name Skywalker because she has no other family, and the closest thing she ever had to a mom and a dad.
Well, also, who were her two masters?
I know that's a little weird because they're the brother and sister, but hey, they've kissed multiple times.
But who were her two masters, Leia and Luke? So it was the ultimate tribute to both.
But that's what I'm saying is I think I've always associated it with the Jedi side of it and not the I'm a kid who doesn't have parents.
I think
this person has watched.
It's all in the stew. It's all in that stew.
I feel that way. Yeah. I guess I've never really put that together so much that Rey would be taking that name because her adoptive mother. That's her name.
I don't want to get too far into that because I know people still don't like Rey Skywalker, that like the name, like how dare they call her Rey Skywalker. It's like, all right, but like relax, dude. When the action figures come out and the movie comes out, like you still going to be crying about it? Like, come on. But I don't get the people who are like, how did she not take the name Solo? I'm like, why would she take the name Solo? Like over Skywalker? That I'm just gonna leave that there. But anyway.
I guess in the argument I was just having, Organa also, but
back to Hamill's performance. My last point, I guess, on this, A+. I think he did such a good job in The Last Jedi that it added a dimension to Luke Skywalker, and because human beings are different in different points in their lives. So it makes sense for maybe Luke to be a bit different, and he's past his prime. He's maybe a little bit more jaded about things, and he finds his way back. But just the performance alone by Mark Hamill, I think, was so good that will help it age well too. Whereas again, I don't want to cite specific examples because I know people like different things, but I don't know, like I thought they did a good job bringing Rocky back for Rocky Balboa. I even thought they did a good job with him in Creed. But then, like, he's in the one after that, and then it starts becoming there's Rocky, everybody applaud, there's Rocky, there he is. And they didn't do that with Luke, and they could have. And Mark Hamill could have given a very surface, just not heart in it performance, with some campiness. He really gave it a lot. Like in that Director and the Jedi, he's brought to tears several times, like giving a lot into his performance and his moments with Frank Oz, all of it. Like just watching the Director and the Jedi again, which I need to again, but watch it again for our listeners if you're down for that, and see what this dude put into that performance. It's just so, I don't want to say surprising, because I think Mark Hamill loves Luke so much and he respects George so much that he wouldn't want to tarnish the legacy of the franchise, even if he vehemently disagree with Ryan's approach. He gave it his all, and he did such a good job. And I think that's another added element to why the third arc or the final arc or the end of Luke Skywalker's story will stand the test of time. And maybe even in the light of some people, they'll warm up to it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you have anything else on this?
Earlier we were talking about Mark Hamill and his opinion on it too. And I know we've said 100 times on this show before that, man, how different it would have been if Mark Hamill liked it. Like totally got it.
I know.
Like the way Ryan sees it, and was like really into it, and was like saying, guys, we took this character and did things that I didn't think we were going to do, but it's great. Like, whoa, how different, and it's like, I almost feel like he like, I don't know what percentage, but I feels like a big chunk of like the way that we see it today is because Mark Hamill himself sees it that way and has like backed up.
That is very valid. Yeah.
And I'm like, man, it stinks that he isn't on the same page. And he's allowed to be. I was thinking earlier about that, and the analogy I came up with is like a 70s or 80s rock star that's like looking at like these new bands, and they're like, they're not rock stars, and then this is a rock star, and they kick over like the plant and they walk out of the room or whatever. And I'm like, people just do things differently today, but people who are listening to the music of today are absolutely going to look at these specific people and say, those guys are rock stars, like, yeah. And that's going to give it, and to be someone from an older age and say the new generation is doing it wrong. That's typical. It just, oh man, it's kind of a bummer. It's like, yeah. I wish Mark Hamill would have been like, to this day, Last Jedi, best Star Wars movie I ever did. I was so glad. I loved what we did with the character. Different. It changes everything, and about the character. And I'm so glad I got to be a part of it. And, so let me ask you this, out that he's not part of it.
Let me ask you this then. What impact does that have in 30, 40 years when Mark Hamill is one with the Force? He'd be 110 or whatever. But I hope he lives to 110, but if he doesn't,
great.
Are the comments he made during The Last 900. Jedi, or the comments he made during the interviews about how he didn't agree, and everything we hear from people off the record about how him and his wife were like just really did not like it at all, are those going to still be around? And are those going to be things that people bring up, or is that going to fade too, which will lend itself to, like your point, that's not a part of the equation as to why people don't like it in years to come, maybe even a generation after this one.
I mean, I definitely think that people who were there, who saw that happen, will they'll pass as well. And so like that will be lost. And it will fall back into this thing of like, I've seen the interviews where George Lucas said he had it all planned out. And I've seen the interviews where he said he didn't have it planned out.
Or the misconception that Alec Guinness hated Star Wars. It couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. It's just like some of that stuff. Like I know there's video evidence of people saying certain things, but at the end of the day, I think we sort of just assume the best out of people because there's absolutely interviews or there's video evidence of Mark Hamill saying, and of course I was wrong. Ryan's story's great and stuff. But it doesn't, it's like I think because we're in the moment and just sort of like public mob mentalities, we just sort of come to this conclusion that the opposite of that is true. And we believe that the opposite of that is true. I do too. That Mark Hamill didn't like the character, and that's fine. But I think like when you get away from when it was happening and our emotions of when he said this and that, and you just get down to like videos of when he said this and when he said that, and similar to George Lucas, like I wasn't there when he was saying these things in the 80s and 90s, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't like paying attention. I see it now just sort of as cataloged stories. I think you're right. I think like we're just going to look at that and we're going to be like, I think at the end of the day, he may or may not have liked the character, but the character is, the story is what it is. And people are just going to draw their conclusions based on how they feel about the story and less about what the actor who played it thought, or the director, or the writer, or whatever. You know, it's just the story is the story. Yeah. And I think as we've examined or discussed, at least in this discussion, that we both tend to think that it will lean positive.
One last thought to just throw out there, just to either drive people crazy or give them something to think about. If Rian Johnson does end up coming back and making something for Star Wars, and he crushes it, that might change things too. But all right. So I hope everyone enjoyed this discussion. We'll definitely touch on it more as time moves on, because that's the point of it, is how well will this age. But as of 2023, still quite divisive amongst people, and not just, you know, Star Wars fans who are diehards in the bubble, but, you know, your casual fans who you talk to who like Star Wars. They're still pretty torn by that movie and what Luke's story was. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion and you're not divisive or divisive about that. But thank you to everybody for listening and watching, being a part of what we got going on here at TRB. We hope you enjoyed the show. Again, remember, at Lacey Gilleran, hit up Lacey on social media. She'll be back when she's back. But for me, I'm at Johnny Hoey, and James, you are at. I'm gonna. Is it Myra Trunks with an M?
Yes.
All right. Get James.
Do you not know?
I know. We're on episode 606,005 million. I think I know by now. Yeah. So James at MIRAH Trunks on social media apps. Special thank you to our patrons. Patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. James talked about it at the top. You can get on the show. All you have to do is join us at our first tier at the major level, $5 a month. Boom. You are making topics. You're on the show. Shout outs, all that, and more. So go check out patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. If you can support us, please do. It helps us out a big deal. Thank you. And we have to give a special shout out to our Generals and Spice Runners. General Carmelo, John RISI, JETTA Rosewater, Frank Grande, Nick KRATZ, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, DANI, Mike Ramori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Sneaky Zebra, Colin Cormier, Jolton Jedi DiMaggio, Diana, and Dave Hornack. Diana just told me she's also going to go see Pantera in our hometown, so that's pretty cool.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to see them at MSG. I'm pumped. Our Spice Runners: David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers. Love you, Jeremy. Michael Fry and the Fort Worthian, and all of our patrons, all of our listeners, everybody in the base, however you like TRB, support TRB, listen. Thank you all so much. James, we will not, we'll probably do something Wednesday night. We haven't really talked about this, but we'll probably have to do something before Thanksgiving this week. That's what we usually do anyway.
Oh, I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, are you free Wednesday?
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. But either way, James and I
we'll
will
have
see
to
you.
be. Yeah.
James and I will see you on the next episode very soon of the Resistance broadcast. So enjoy your weeks. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you all soon. And until next time, we'll see you around, kids.